Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com. As I mentioned in my last video, I like to do things sometimes that just make it interesting for me. I know most people tune in to see tarot readings, and you do learn, if you're interested in learning tarot, you do learn proficiency by watching somebody else, right? Doesn't mean that I'm doing it completely the way you choose to end up doing it yourself, but watching other people, interpret cards is interesting. And I think it's interesting myself. Sometimes I'll tune in to other people when they do readings because I like to see how I might have done it differently. But they're the diviner and they're the ones who are doing the reading. So the message is coming through them and the perceived message is coming through them. So it's none of my business to challenge what they're saying. And I feel that way, from the other point of view as well. But I already know how to read the cards, and so, and it's, although I find it fascinating and I love to interpret cards, I also really love, the thing I love about tarot is constantly learning. And so, astrology has been something that I've discussed many times. It's just something that I think the ship has sailed for me on learning astrology and applying it to tarot. I've tried, but it never gelled, it never stuck. And I learned too that there have been tarot decks whereby the assignments they give certain cards vary from deck to deck. So not every tarot deck that has astrological notations on it, it's not universal. In other words, like not every tarot deck with astrological symbols share the same astrological symbols for each card. So that makes it really confusing for someone like me who doesn't know anything about tarot. Now, I think it's been understood that you don't need astrology to understand tarot. You can completely do tarot readings without understanding astrology. And when decks have astrological symbols on them, I sometimes make an effort. I mean, I have made efforts through the years. I have cheat sheets where I have the symbols, and I notate next to the symbols what the meaning of the planet could suggest. And then I've also done it too for signs of the zodiac. And what I've done for the signs of the zodiac is I've gone to a number of astrological sources, and then I take down the things that most of the sources say, for example, Sagittarius has in common, or that Leo has in common. So I've done that, right? But it still never sticks. And I've noticed that the assignments that are given to cards, I don't always see it. Like, knowing that I know the origin stories of the cards, I don't always understand how they got the astrological assignment for a particular card. So I thought it might be a fun exercise to do that today. I have chosen 2 tarot decks that have different assignations for astrological meanings on the triumph cards and the other cards as well, but I'm only showcasing the triumph order. One deck that I'm using is the Tarot of the Holy Light. Now, I know that this is a first edition. It's no longer, this edition is no longer published or being made available. I don't even know if you can get the deck in future I don't know. I really don't know. But it is a case in point where the astrological symbols on the cards vary differently from other tarot decks that I've had. This deck was created by Christine Payne-Towler and Michael Dowers. And what it does, it heavily borrows art from historical documents and stuff like that. And it kind of puts elements from different artworks together. And then, of course, my Fortuna, which is, a new deck that I've showcased a couple times already. And I do have a few decks of the Fortuna publications, and this one happens to be Obsidian, Occult Obsidian or something like that. What is it? Obsidian Occult, I think. Yeah. Now, the reason I chose these is because, now one of them is, like, for example, the artwork is very detailed. And bear in mind that tarot art historically has nudity. So you're going to see nudity in this deck. Nothing vulgar, but some of this artwork is from the Middle Ages. Some is from the 1600s. You know, throughout the course of history, and there's nudity. Okay, so if you're offended by something that you might see in a museum, this is not the video for you or your children. Now, the Fortuna deck does not have. It's more abstract. So, and there's more. It's more minimalist, but I don't know if it's minimalist, but it's more abstract. Okay, so for example, we have the Fool from Tarot of the Holy Light. And for the Fool, you probably can't see the symbol because one of the things they probably have done better in subsequent videos, subsequent publications, is probably to make the name of the card and their assignation better because it's barely visible here. But anyway, they assign the Fool with the Sun. And from my cheat sheet, when I look at the Sun and I have my notations that I got from multiple sources, I see the Sun is described as ego, vitality, and purpose. So I don't know. I don't know if I would equate the Fool with ego, vitality, and purpose. You know, I don't know that if I didn't know tarot, if I just saw that notation, if it would help me understand what the meaning of the Fool was. In the Fortuna deck, which they call Seeker, they give us a symbol for Uranus, which when I go to my source, you know, that I showed you before, the keywords that I came up with are originality, eccentricity, and sudden changes. Now that one I can see. I can understand that one for the Fool. You know, now I'm also wondering if they're not the reason for different assignations of astrological assignments to the cards might have to do with different schools of astrology, just like tarot has different schools. I mean, there's Thoth, there's Rider-Waite-Smith, there's, you know, TDM, there's Continental. This deck subscribes to a type of tarot that's called Continental. So there's different schools of tarot, and there might be different schools of astrology also. Now, that goes also to prove that perhaps their understanding of the Fool in the Tarot of the Holy Light isn't the way I describe, isn't the way I think about the Fool. Maybe it is about ego, vitality, and purpose. Maybe when they interpret the card, they don't look at it as like chance or originality or eccentricity or anything like that. Okay, the second card, they call the Magus. We familiarly call it the Magician. The only thing they have here for the Magus is the sign for air. So the air, the wind, I suppose. I suppose the wind could be seen as mercurial, although if you wanted to express that aspect, it would make more sense to me to assign Mercury to it, as does the Fortuna deck. We have the assignation of Mercury here. And Mercury, according to my cheat sheet, is protective, wit, communicative, and clever. But just understanding Mercury and understanding mercurial, I can see the connection for the Magician. That's like a footnote mercurial. I get it. I understand the association. So the third card, the priestess or the high priestess or the female pope, whatever you want to call it, they have, what appears to be a crescent moon. So there, and then we have a moon up here. We do have a sun. So we have an association with the moon. That's it. That's the only notation on this card for the female pope. In Fortuna, we also have the moon. So in this card, both of these decks concur that the moon is a good representation for the female Pope. And for the moon, my notation just says emotional and motherly. Okay, the third card, or the third number 3 card, is Empress. And I believe they both have Venus as the symbol. As I said, in the Tarot of the Holy Light, it's not real easy. And then Venus up here. So, you know, the notation for Venus is, you know, fertility, beauty, enthusiasm. Fertility, beauty, and enthusiasm. So for number 3, I can understand the association with like fertility, because number 3 is the number of growth, right? You have more than 2 things, so you're on a trend of growth. So I get that. I can see fertility as well. Certainly an empress was expected to, you know, have the children of the emperor, unless she was an empress in her own right. But then she was expected to have children too, because that's how the line would move on, right? So I can understand that they both would come up with, you know, the empress for fertility, and for the empress, I can see it. I can see it, and it would help, you know, to some degree. For the emperor, for the Tarot of the Holy Light, I think that they have a symbol of Jupiter down here. Like I said, it's really hard to see. And for the Emperor in the Fortuna deck, they have Aries. So the description for Jupiter is teacher, war, and luck. Those were the things that I got from the books that they had in common. He was a teacher. He was warlike, and has to do with luck. And then for Fortuna, since we have Aries, it's fire, a bold leader, and one who can overcome challenges. And those are the things I think we're looking for in a leader, right? So I can see this, you know, the association with the Emperor as being Aries. I can see that enhancing an understanding of the Emperor. To some degree, I think Jupiter could too. I mean, Jupiter, certainly, you know, world leaders are called to be ahead of, you know, decisions in war. So I can see that to some degree. But in assuming that we're talking just in terms of a leader and hoping that there's no war, you know, I think that the Aries probably is not a bad connection. That's just my own personal take on it. Okay, for the Hierophant, as they call, I think they both, oh, this one calls it the Hierophant. So the Tarot of the Holy Light calls the Pope card the Hierophant. And if I referred to the Emperor before as the Pope, I apologize. This is the Pope, that was the Emperor. We have Aries here. So what we had described in the Emperor for the Fortuna, we have now described as the Pope in the Tarot of the Holy Light. So it's a fire sign, a bold leader, someone who can overcome challenges. Now, when we think of the Pope is more of a confidant, or someone who you go to for spiritual understanding and knowledge. So you see with this card that the meaning of this card is different from maybe my understanding of what the Pope would be. So it wouldn't help me to use a deck like this, because their understanding, or the message of the Pope that they have, wouldn't jibe with the message of the Pope that I would have in mind. Now with this card, the Pope card is called the Oracle, and they have Taurus as the notation up here. And for Taurus, you know, earth, reliable, comfort, practical, with aesthetic taste. So I'm not sure that that jibes with me either. I see, you know, the understanding of the Pope as being a confidant, a spiritual, someone an authority, someone who's got strict authoritarian views, like a narrow vision, narrow scope. Maybe Taurus people might be like that a little bit. but aren't we all? I think we all overlap, you know. When I think of somebody who's, you know, certain sun signs, you know, in the day when I used to look that kind of stuff up, and I would see somebody being described in that way that I knew was a Taurus or whatever. I could see it in them, but I could also see it in myself, you know, for example. Okay, the Lover's card. Now the notation for the Lover's card here is Taurus. So it seems, you see what I'm saying? It seems like a couple of the cards they're out of sync with each other, what they assign. So there must be something cyclical with astrology, that some people adhere to one type and, you know, where the assignments are a little different. But for the Lover's card, being Taurus with this one, it's described as an earth sign, reliable, comfort, practical, aesthetic tastes. It doesn't discuss partnerships, you know. And for the Lover card here, we have the symbol for the Gemini, immutable air sign, information, social, versatility, and mental alertness. So we can understand Gemini because it's the sign of the twins, so there's like a partnership or there's something like that between people. But as far as the other attributes, you know, I'm not necessarily sure I ascribe to them. Here we have the Chariot, and here it's assigned to Gemini. So mutable air sign, information, social versatility, and a mental alertness. Now I see that the Chariot is the sign of success, moving forward, progression, having accomplished something, being determined, being ambitious. For the Fortuna deck, the representation for the Chariot is Cancer. And then when I read my cheat sheet, you know, Cancer is emotional depth, references home, family, sensitive, and intuitive, which doesn't really add anything to my understanding of what the Chariot means. So I don't, you know, I guess the reason why I never really went whole hog or after like a surface understanding of what astrology, what connections, you know, people who make decks that have astrological symbols on them, it didn't jive with my understanding of the cards. So I just kind of disregarded it. If I liked the art, I used it, you know, but I just disregarded the astrological stuff. But it gets tricky though, because when you do a reading for somebody and they know astrological stuff and you're saying one thing and it's got astrological symbols that don't correlate with what you're saying, it can get, you know, it can get like annoying, right? So then what I do is then I end up not using the card with astrological stuff on it. Okay, the next card, Justice. Now this card, this deck does have Justice as 8, whereas the Fortuna does not. But for the sake of this video, I put them both in the same order. So for here, Justice, we have Cancer. So, which is strange, right? We have the Sword of Justice and we have the Scales of Justice, and they associate it with Cancer. I mean, that is the Cancer symbol. Let me see. Yeah, that's a 69 over here. Like it looks like this, you know, the Cancer symbol. So is water, emotional depth, home, family, sensitive, intuitive, just like I just read for the other card, which was for the Fortuna, for the Chariot. For Justice with the Fortuna, we have something that I would think most people would associate with Justice, which would be Libra. If you're going to associate it with any of the signs of the zodiac, Libra makes the most sense since its sign of the zodiac has scales, right? So it's an air sign, balance, you know, balance, social harmony, and fairness. This seems like a really good connection there. I could see that with this one. I could see with the Fortuna deck more than the Tarot of the Holy Light. They're the connections that they're making. I don't agree with all of them. Some of them don't help me if I didn't know the meanings of the cards. But knowing the meanings of the cards and then understanding where they're coming from, I can get it a bit more. Okay, now here we have the Hermit. And with this deck, Tarot of the Holy Light, they associate it with Leo, which is fire, a fire sign. And, you know, the cheat sheet that I have is creativity, leadership, shy confidence, generosity, and ego. I'm not sure that I understand the Hermit in that way. Here we have the Hermit of the Fortuna deck. And they just grabbed the Hermit as Virgo, which is a mutable earth sign. And they describe it as analytical, critical thinking, attention to detail, make the world a better place. So I can see how that definition would enhance the Hermit card. I can see that. Now we get kind of interesting with the Wheel of Fortune. With the Wheel of Fortune here, the symbol is really hard to understand. I can't even make it out. It looks like an MR. So I use the book. They have a book. They also have an app, which I have the app for the phone. So I looked up in the book what they had to say about the Wheel of Fortune because I couldn't make out the symbol on the card. And in the book, and you know, I could have looked it up on the app too, but I had the book handy, so I used it. It's Virgo, immutable earth sign, analytical, critical thinking, attention to detail, make the world a better place, which is exactly what Fortuna said about the Hermit, which made sense to me. I don't necessarily see the Wheel of Fortune as those things. I see it as change, luck, you know, a change of luck. Lady Fortuna was, you know, the whole point of the card. So in the Fortuna deck, we have the symbol for Jupiter, who was described as a teacher, helps in war, and luck. So there is an aspect of Jupiter that has to do with luck. It's a stretch, but it's there. Okay, now this is interesting. Now here we have Fortitude or Strength, as they call it here. And in this card, they associate the symbol here is I believe, Mars, right? That's a symbol for Mars, for strength, okay? And for Fortitude, they describe it as aggression, anger, and strength. But you know, Fortitude I don't think means aggression. It could. It could. I don't equate it with anger. The whole point of Fortitude is to have moral fortitude, right? These cards were describing virtuous lifestyles, and you know, the lack of virtue would have been the Devil card. But Fortitude would have been seen as a virtue. And anger and brute strength, I think sometimes people can justify brute strength as being a virtuous thing if they want to get their way and they have power. I guess I could see that. But I don't know. I see Fortitude more as a virtue. Now in this deck, the Fortuna deck, let's see what they have for Fortitude. Okay, now Fortitude frequently, traditionally, is depicted with a lion. You know, that's the classic representation of Fortitude. So it makes sense that I think tarot decks might, if they're going to have an association with Fortitude, with Leo, which is what this deck does. So according to my cheat sheet, the association with Leo is fire, creativity, leadership, confidence, generosity, and ego. I don't know if I would necessarily describe or understand the Fortitude card as being those things. Leadership, I could see that. Confidence, I can see that too. But, you know, some of the other things I think are a stretch. Okay, here we have the Hanged Man in the Tarot of the Holy Light card. And I think we have the symbol of Libra here. Here's where we have Libra, which is described as air, balance, social harmony, and fairness. Well, my understanding of the Hanged Man is somebody who is consequenced or punished for a social faux pas, to say the least, treason, something terrible. He's identifiable because the whole point of the image was to disgrace him and his family for the crime, like a wanted poster, to identify who he is. So, but I know that in the occultist decks, they don't have the punishment as a meaning for the hanged man. I mean, that's one of the different meanings that the occultists adopted. Perhaps they didn't know about the Italian source, right? So they had to make stuff up. So I think they, or they had a different agenda, so they see him as an enlightened one. And it could be argued that if you make mistakes and you're punished for them, you will become enlightened. But I think there could be an aspect of the hanged man, but it's not the point of the hanged man, right? So, as I mentioned, Libra, air, balance, social harmony, and fairness. Now, for the Fortuna card, bear in mind that, it's also an occultist deck. Their idea for the hanged man was the symbol for Neptune, which they saw, the notation, not in their book, but in my cheat sheets that I took from independent sources. Neptune represents dreams, illusions, and psychic stuff. It's not my understanding of the hanged man in either case. Now here we have the death card, which is very interesting. Here, death is just, the notation there is for water. Water. And then in the Fortuna deck, death has the representation, the notation for Scorpio. Water is part of it. Passion, deep emotional depth, intuitive powers, strong-willed, explore the mysteries. I can understand that aspect of death. It's certainly mysterious. Okay, Temperance. With the Tarot of the Holy Light, we have the symbol for Scorpio down here. Again, it's like skewed, So there must be a different cycle. I don't know, because it seems like they're all off by one, Any rate, for Temperance, Scorpio is described as water, passion, deep emotional depth, intuitive powers, strong-willed, explore mysteries. So it's different. Okay, for Temperance here, they call it alchemy, which is something that a lot of, occultist decks, if they rename this card, they'll call it alchemy. And they reference it to Sagittarius. It's a mutable fire sign, adventure, open-minded, optimistic, traveler, freedom, lifelong learners. So neither of these really touch base on what Temperance is for me. Okay, the Devil. Now this will be very interesting. I think. Where's the Devil? Did I miss the... Don't tell me I missed the Devil. I missed the Devil! Okay, I missed the Devil on this one. So I'll have to do this. So for the Devil, okay, so for the Devil, they have Sagittarius on this one. So everything I just said about Temperance or alchemy for the Fortuna deck applies to the Devil. So I'll read it from, I'll read what I wrote for Sagittarius on Temperance on the other card. So for the Devil, Tarot of the Holy Light sees the Devil as Sagittarius, mutable fire, adventure, open-minded, optimistic, traveler, freedom, lifelong students. Well, I understand the devil to represent an absence of virtue. So this symbol wouldn't help me understand the card. Now for Fortuna, the devil card, they have it associated with Capricorn. I think I've seen it represented by Capricorn in other decks. Capricorn is an earth sign, aspires to success, is ambitious, career-oriented, responsible, strong work ethic. So the devil could be those things if it becomes corrupt, right? There's nothing wrong with having to aspire to be successful. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious. There's nothing wrong to be career-oriented unless it interferes with things instead of people. My little motto is when I get mad or somebody breaks something, or when the kids were little, or even now, like if I have something that means something to me and somebody breaks it or damages it, the little mantra in my head is people before things. So there's nothing wrong with being ambitious or career-oriented as long as it doesn't interfere with human beings or humanity, and responsible work ethic, etc. So the application of Capricorn to the devil would be as if Capricorn was corrupt. But in and of itself, Capricorn isn't corrupt. So it's a little wobbly for me. Okay, the Tower of Destruction, as it's called in the Tarot of the Holy Light. We know it as the Tower card. They have it as an earth. They represent it as Capricorn, which is an earth, I guess an earth sign. And everything I just said about the other card is that it aspires to succeed, is ambitious, career-oriented, responsible, strong work ethic. So again, all those things don't really mean anything like the Tower does, unless it's corrupt. So Capricorn going for the Tower or going for the devil works as long as you understand it's the corrupt nature of Capricorn and not the ideal Capricorn. The Tower with Fortuna is represented, they have Mars represented here, which is aggression, anger, strength, which I guess, could represent destruction. So, the astrological associations are not like clinching what it means, right? It's not clinching the essence or the spirit of the card, which is why I guess I never really embraced it. And I ignore them. But I do think it's interesting to look at. Okay, we have the Star card with the Tarot of the Holy Light. It's associated with Mercury, protection, wit, good communication, clever. The Fortuna deck associates the Star card with Aquarius, which makes sense because even in this depiction of the Star card, we have an illustration of the sign of Aquarius. So it's curious that they chose to depict this Star card with Aquarius, but when it came time to choosing something for it, they didn't choose the sign of Aquarius, they chose Mercury. Okay, so now for the Star card for Fortuna, we have the symbol for Aquarius. Air, innovative, individual, independent, individual freedom, challenge of social norms. I don't understand the Star card in that light either. It may describe people who were born Aquarius, but as far as understanding what the Star card means in tarot, there's a disconnect there for me, for both of them. Okay, the Moon card. With the Tarot of the Holy Light, we have the symbol for Aquarius here. So you see, it's out of kilter. Each one of these decks is a little bit out of kilter, which makes me think they follow a different cycle. So the Aquarius card for Moon would be air. Innovative, individual, independent, personal freedom, challenge of social norms. The Moon card with Fortuna, they associate with Pisces. Mutable water sign, emotional depth, intuitive, sensitive, artistic, empathetic, and compassionate. And those are all aspects and features that I can connect with the Moon card. Moon card can mean other things as well, but those are things that I can definitely connect to the Moon card. Now for the Sun, the Tarot of the Holy Light connects it to Pisces, the Sun. Mutable water, emotional depth, intuitive, sensitive, artistic, empathic, and compassionate. And with the Fortuna card, the Sun is equated with the Sun. Makes sense? And the Sun is, I guess, the position of the planetary, the Sun is in the house, I guess, of ego, vitality, and purpose. That makes sense. It jives. The Judgment card for the Tarot of the Holy Light, they have the symbol for it is, I think, Saturn. And they don't, from an independent source, remember, I'm going to independent sources. Karma, justice, honor, and fatalism. Which, to me, I'm surprised nobody chose Saturn for the Wheel of Fortune. That would have made sense. Karma, justice, honor, fatalism. Okay, but accountability, meeting your maker, can definitely have an aspect of karma and justice. So I can see the connection there with this one. Judgment here in the Fortuna deck, they associate with Pluto. Death, rebirth, subconscious, below the surface. Now for me, I would associate death with those things. I don't understand why neither one of them use Pluto for death, right? And then the last card, the World card, as it's called in Tarot of the Holy Light, we have that's just the symbol for fire. It includes symbols, these symbols. It includes the symbols for Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, stars in our solar system. At the time, those were the known planets, I suppose. And then in this deck, World card is called the Universe. And the Universe is represented by Saturn, which is karma, justice, honor, and fatalism. So you see that each one of them is like, they're off a little bit. So there must be something about the cycle of astrology that they each follow that's not the same. And I imagine that must happen across the board with tarot decks that's, ascribed to astrology. And then each one of them may have different ideas. Now, if I went to their book to see I went to like independent sources to come up with my cheat sheets, right? Because I wanted to get sources that weren't affiliated with either of these decks and to have common things that were repeated in independent sources. So I wrote down the words, the keywords that were common in independent sources, which I was just trying to, completely just be independent, like making independent connections, right? So I don't know. I'm just inclined to like ignore the astrological stuff, on cards. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting, and I do think it is interesting. And so I do I always try to learn. And so this was a good exercise for me to see their orientation to some degree And I'm sure, now, I read this book from cover to cover, and I'll tell you what. Psh, way over my head, you know. About with the astrological stuff. It was so heavy-handed with the astrological stuff that they were defining the meanings of the triumph cards by the astrological stuff. That was my impression. I could be wrong, but that's how I understood it. So I kind of felt like, well, all you have to do to know the meaning of the cards is to know their origin stories, you know. So as beautiful as this deck is, I disregard when I used it. I don't use it anymore, really. But as beautiful as this deck is, I just completely disregarded all the astrological stuff, which is a heavy-handed feature of this deck. For the Fortuna, I'm more in understanding how they came to those conclusions, but I still ignore it because I already know what the meanings of the cards are. But I just wanted to, I thought it would be very interesting to just do a video and just, and if, to just do a video on it. And if you learn, say for example, you learn tarot and then you have another deck that has astrological symbols that adhere to this same structure with astrology. Then you go to another deck and you see other symbols, you know, that may confuse you, right? That's my story and I'm sticking to it. I hope you found this interesting. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind, and be brave.